And we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our mobility debate for the Santa Monica City Council race. We're very excited to have 5 candidates here: Barry Snell, Dan Hall, Ellis Raskin, Ericka Lesley, and Natalya Zernitskaya. Did I do okay, Natalya? Thank you. So here's how we're going to do this tonight. A few minutes on some context and history, both the general LA area and Santa Monica in particular. We're going to go to candidate opening statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute to do their opening statement. We have prepared 8 questions for the candidates. Each candidate will get 1 minute to respond. Then we'll go to audience Q&A. There's a Q&A feature in the Zoom. So if you have a question, please ask it there, and we'll get to some of those. And then each candidate will get a 1 minute closing statement. So I'm Michael Schneider. I'm the CEO of Streets for All. We've been doing this since 2019. And we'd like to start with some general history and context of sort of where we're at as a region. So traffic is actually really expensive. In the LA economy in general, it's estimated that we lose $19 billion per year in lost productivity by people being stuck in gridlock. It's also dangerous. According to one study, domestic violence actually goes up by about 9% on the most heavy traffic days. So we're so stressed out, it's leading to horrible things. Our air is pretty bad. On extra heavy smog days, you smoke up to the equivalent of 4 cigarettes per day just by breathing. We rank the worst in the nation for year-round ozone emissions and 5th worst for particle pollution. We have one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. We used to say, and this is more in the city of LA, Santa Monica, slightly better, but not great, that a pedestrian was killed once every 3 days. Unfortunately, that is now once every 2 days, and they're injured once every 5 hours. It's especially dangerous if you're in a wheelchair, much higher likelihood of being killed in a crash. We have a pedestrian fatality rate that is nearly 4 times the national average. So LA is a very dangerous place to even cross the street. Our transit system suffers as well. The average bus in LA County goes less than 11 miles per hour. That's actually less than an average cyclist or scooter rider. And the most interesting thing is 2/3 of all trips made within the city, this applies in Santa Monica too, this is countywide, are less than 5 miles. Half are less than 3 miles. So imagine how many cars we'd get off the road if we just had a more balanced transportation system with more options for those shorter trips. So you add all this up, and it's just not great, and we need to do better as a region. Specific to Santa Monica, last year, 2 people were killed, 27 were severely injured. That includes 44 people riding bikes and 52 pedestrians. And you can see on this map the dots of where the injuries happened. It's really just citywide on all the major arterials. Santa Monica loves plans. They're not unique. LA loves plans too, that unfortunately don't always get implemented. So as you can see here, these are the bike plans that city councils approved in the past: 37 miles in 2011, 82 miles in 2014, 136 miles in 2020, and then in 2024 that went up by 1 mile to 137. So far, 3 miles of those 137 have been implemented, and that's really since 2020. So it's, again, not unique to Santa Monica, but the city loves plans and doesn't always follow through on their plans, and we need to do better on that. Of the bike plan, you can see on the left existing protected bike lanes in Santa Monica, and on the right, the planned protected bike lanes. And the city has only built around 14 miles of about 48 miles of protected bike lanes that are planned. So a few key projects that we think are really critical in Santa Monica. The Michigan Avenue Greenway, which is just being finished up, is a really important project, but it's missing a key diverter that was originally part of the project that would actually make it complete and divert cars off of the Greenway. Enhancing Broadway's bike lanes and upgrading them to protected with enhanced crossings for pedestrians and better signalization, we think is really important. The pedestrian safety improvements planned on Pico between 27th and Centinela, we think are really critical. Colorado, protected bike lane all the way from 17th Street to 5th Street, really important project to plug that gap. And those are some of the things we would like to see happen in the future. We're now going to go to our candidates, and the order at the bottom of the screen, it's just in order. We're just going to keep rotating it. So Barry will start here. Dan will be first on the next question, Eric on the following one, and so forth. So Barry, whenever you're ready, we're ready to begin with your opening statement.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. My name is Barry Snell, and I've been a member of the Santa Monica community for more than 20 years. My wife and I have successfully raised 5 children, 4 of which have gone through Santa Monica school systems. Presently, I'm a trustee for Santa Monica College and a CPA who's deeply committed to providing services and driving the future of Santa Monica. My primary objectives are centered around the needs of the community, ensuring safety and being prepared for whatever the community lies ahead. In that light, I believe that Santa Monica could be a leader as a walkable city. On council, I will support policies that will make our community more economically resilient, our residents healthier, and our city more environmentally sustainable. I look forward to our discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, and for being under time. That's rare. We're next going to go to Dan.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for hosting us this evening, Michael and team, and thanks to my colleagues for joining me. My name is Dan Hall. I am a renter, an Iraq War veteran, a Santa Monica Pier Board member, and an organizer and former vice president of the Santa Monica Democratic Club. I'm here tonight because issues of transit and street safety are deeply important to me personally. My partner and I are a one-car household. We do that by choice and, frankly, necessity. It's how we can afford to live in Santa Monica. I use my bike, e-scooters, the bus, the Expo line, and my own 2 feet to get everywhere, including my work every day. I've literally walked every street in this city end to end, so I have seen it all here, the good and the bad. And we still have a lot of bad, outdated practices, as you've seen on some of the maps that Michael showed, that are unsafe throughout the city. And that's unfortunately had some devastating effects for bicyclists and pedestrians this past year. You know, we have a huge opportunity this year to transform the city council with a new urbanist majority that believes in data, NACDO best practices, has read Jeff Speck and respects Donald Shoup. For the past 4 years, we've had, okay, sorry. Sorry. Thanks so much. I'm excited to talk to everyone.
Thank you. Ericka.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ericka Lesley. I'm currently on the board for Downtown Santa Monica. I'm also the chair for Rent Control Board. I'm in touch with a lot of our residents here in the city of Santa Monica, and I'm running to be their voice. A lot of our families are struggling, and they need to have their voices at the table. They feel unheard, and they feel actually like no one's listening. So I'm running to make sure that their voices are heard and our concerns are brought forward from our labor and our families and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just reset this here. Okay, Ellis.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Michael and Ellery and everyone for putting on this very important forum. In a community where more kids die from traffic violence than gun violence, this is a really timely forum, and I look forward to talking with my esteemed colleagues tonight. So my name is Ellis Raskin. I'm the chair of the Santa Monica Planning Commission. I'm an elected member of the Sierra Club Angeles Chapter Executive Committee, and I'm an environmental attorney. In my day job, I represent transit agencies, and a lot of my work involves building livable and more walkable and transit-friendly communities. I've had the honor of serving as lead counsel in the Friends and Families for Move Culver City lawsuit against the city of Culver City's misguided decision to remove protected bike lanes and pedestrian features to replace them with car lanes. Transit is personal to me. I take the Expo line to work. I walk to city planning commission meetings. My niece walks to college. We need to do a lot better in our community to build a more livable, walkable city, and I look forward to talking about that tonight.
Thank you. And Natalya.
Hi, folks. My name's Natalya Zernitskaya, and I'm running for Santa Monica City Council because after everything that this country and this community has given me, I would be ashamed and disappointed in myself if I didn't do everything in my power to protect and expand the types of programs and resources that helped my family and myself when I was growing up. My family and I were Jewish refugees from the former Soviet Union, and we moved to the United States in the mid-90s. We were really lucky that we got to move to San Francisco because I got to grow up in a rent-controlled apartment in a walkable neighborhood where I could walk or take the bus to my excellent public school every single day. I've been part of the Santa Monica community and advocating for positive change for over a decade, including a lot around housing and transportation and how the two are interrelated. I can't wait to bring that expertise to the council.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna take the first question, followed by Ellery. So here's the first question. Santa Monica has initiated some very progressive plans, such as the Bike Action Plan, which was amended in 2020 to add protected bike lanes. However, due to staff shortages and budget cuts, the city has fallen behind on these crucial plans. What do you think of the Bike Action Plan? And if elected, how would you accelerate its implementation? And we'll go ahead and start with Dan.
Thanks, Michael. So like I said in my intro, I'm fully committed to multimodal streets and ensuring that our Bike Action Plan from 2011 and the Bike Action Plan amendment from 2020 are fully implemented. I am a strong believer in the protected bike lanes that we have. You see one here on Colorado, but also the ones that we implemented last year on Ocean Ave and 17th Street. Unlike the incumbents who have pushed to shave the island sizes on our Dutch-style protected intersections and have questioned the efficacy of concrete barriers, I'm fully in support of them. I want to ensure that they meet NACTO standards and best practices. And I also want to make sure that our bike lanes that are being built in the protected manner are going to be wide enough to accommodate cargo bikes and increase throughput that we know we'll need in the future. And I would be fully supportive of investing in our mobility staff to ensure that the Bike Action Plan is implemented as appropriate.
Thank you. Ericka.
I have to make sure I'm being heard. I have a lot of technical issues. Well, I believe in our bike plan, but I'd also like to reinforce it with rumble strips to make sure, because we have a lot of distracted drivers here in Santa Monica. We have a lot of EVs and people I see going along the lanes with looking at their phones. So I think that they need to be reinforced where they're already in place, and then expand out in places and in ways that we're also being sensitive to the businesses that are also along those lanes so that they can still practice their businesses. Thank you.
Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. First and foremost, it needs to be a budget priority. We saw last night at the budget discussion that we're going to have to really fight for the full budget implementation for projects like this. So we need to keep our eye on the ball with respect to budgeting. But more so than that, it's really creating a culture of not being antithetical towards common sense pedestrian and bicycle protections like what we already have laid out in our Bike Action Plan so that they can move forward. To Dan's point, which I think hit the nail on the head, we've seen a culture develop recently where folks in our city government really have not embraced the culture of building cities that are friendly towards bicyclists, cities that are friendly towards pedestrians. Michael, you mentioned earlier in your introduction the number of serious injuries along East Pico, for example, where I live, and actually where Natalya lives, right around the corner from Pico and Stewart, where we've had some really serious accidents. We need folks to just bring this to the forefront of public consciousness and the public dialogue in politics.
Thank you. Natalya.
I am fully in support of our Bike Action Plan, and I would love to be able to get it fully implemented as soon as possible. As some of my colleagues have mentioned, the budget is a big issue and a big challenge in getting it fully implemented. We need the staffing, we need the funding for the actual materials, we need a bunch of things. I agree with Ellis that we need to make sure it is a budget priority. At the same time, I think that we need to leverage our relationships that we have with our state and federal legislators. Santa Monica has a really strong working relationship with Congressman Ted Lieu, and he's been very good at getting funding for projects in his district. So I think that the more we can use those relationships to get other outside sources of funding, the faster we'll be able to get to full implementation and beautiful bike network vision that we have.
Thank you. Barry?
I support the bike action plan, as most of my colleagues said. I think that the plan that was instituted in 2017 was a very thoughtful plan and very futuristic. I live in the Pico neighborhood, which we have on our 17th Street and our Michigan Avenue been the first layout of the bike plan, which has been phenomenal. It's changed the 17th Street station to our college in Santa Monica. The entire street has changed completely. So I would also look at our state and our county community to see where is there funding available for it. I'd also take a look at enforcement and see how we could look at enforcing the laws with respect to drivers so that those funding would also go towards the bike plan. But I'm a big supporter of it.
Thank you. Over to Ellery.
According to the Transportation Injury Mapping System, in the last 10 years, Santa Monica has had 308 crashes that resulted in fatalities or serious injuries, with pedestrians making up 34.1% of all affected parties. Yet the city has fallen behind on its pedestrian action plan. Do you commit to the implementation of the pedestrian action plan? If so, how would you accelerate its implementation to make Santa Monica safer for pedestrians, bikers, and drivers alike? We'll start with Ericka.
Thank you for asking me that question. As a mother of a son and a close friend of mine that have been recently injured by traffic incidents, my son was on his bike and got injured, and a friend of mine was injured as he was walking. I think our biggest thing right now is just try to switch to an adaptive traffic signals for right now and use AI so it can be more comprehensive as to when traffic is traveling so it can stop more so when they sense people crossing streets or incoming bikes and cars so they don't crash into each other. And also using rumble strips so that people that pay attention when they're leaving the lane. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis.
Yeah, I think this again comes down to making it a budget priority and making it a policy priority for the folks who are elected officials. But to Ericka's point, and as others have brought up here tonight, there are some really simple, low-cost options that you can implement to make our streets safer for pedestrians. No right on red is a great example. Simple daylighting, as Jesse Zwick was talking about last night at the council meeting. These are really, really simple common sense options that should be prioritized as part of our rollout of these plans. But again, it's again a matter of public consciousness and electing leaders who really make this part of their ethos. A few months ago at the Planning Commission, we heard about some stories from Santa Monica High students who walk and bike to school each day and really put their lives on the line doing so. It's scary out there, and we need council members who understand that it is not safe for pedestrians, and we need to implement those common sense measures immediately.
Thank you. Natalya.
So yes, I absolutely commit to implementing the pedestrian action plan. I agree with some of my colleagues that we can start with the smaller things like leading pedestrian intervals, like no right on red, like ending beg buttons. There are so many small things we can do that make it more welcoming and inviting to be a pedestrian or biker or bicyclist, I guess, in the city. And I also think that one of the first things that we need to do in order to get to the full implementation of the plan is to slow down cars. We all know that the speed at which a vehicle is moving really impacts how severe injuries are. So if we can get small things like protected bike lanes and other physical things that make cars go slower, it'll go a long way.
Thank you, Natalia. Barry.
Well, my colleagues have said many of the things that I agree with. One of the things that I would think about doing when I'm on council is try to pass an ordinance that says anytime there's an accident on a particular street, we set up some kind of rules where we would change the nature of the street. And it wouldn't be something that we just talk about. It's something that we would enact. We have to slow cars down. We have to make streets and neighborhoods more walkable. And we have to look at those streets that are high volume traffic streets and look at how we can change the street completely so that it will reduce the amount of traffic that would go through that street. So those are some of the things I would think about, but I am a strong advocate of the pedestrian action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, finally, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. I'm absolutely committed to our pedestrian action plan. All of our lighted intersections should have LPIs, and I think they should be 6 seconds minimum and longer where appropriate for distance. Jesse Swick led a 16-item last year where the top 10 most dangerous intersections had this implemented. We need to be talking about the next 20, the next 30 most dangerous intersections. I think we should be using raised crosswalks and use of pedestrian islands near our schools. We should be implementing bulb outs. Our crosscuts should be perpendicular and not this diagonal stuff that spits out strollers and folks in wheelchairs into the middle of the intersection. We should be using infrastructure like bike racks and bollards and garden planters in every daylight zone across the city. We're not getting our fair share because our leaders haven't prioritized it. There's so much federal funding out there in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and they haven't told staff to go after it, and they haven't prioritized funding staff to go after that.
Thank you. Back to Michael.
Thanks, Ellery. So the next question is about diverters. Diverters are inexpensive treatments that prevent car traffic from going through, but allow pedestrians and cyclists to continue on the street. This reduces cut-through traffic and makes streets a lot safer to bike and walk on. Santa Monica just completed the expansion of the Michigan Avenue Greenway through 20th Street, but the average daily vehicle count still far exceeds that of a greenway. The project originally had a diverter in it, but it has yet to be implemented. Question is, do you support adding diverters in Santa Monica to make certain streets safer to walk and bike on? And would you specifically support adding a traffic diverter on Michigan? And if you do, where else in the city do you think they would make sense? We're going to start with Ellis on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody who walks and scoots and bikes on Michigan, I can tell you it's scary out there. And shout out to the Mobility for Who Instagram, if you guys haven't seen it, capturing real live video of how scary it is out there on some of our streets. Yeah, we absolutely need diverters. I mean, especially on Michigan, where there's such a great opportunity to make it a really livable, walkable street. We need to do this on really, I think, a lot of streets. I think Pearl is one great option where folks often use that as cut through traffic during rush hour, where it really gets quite scary for folks walking there, folks biking there. There are a lot of other great options. I'd even support expanding some of our major boulevards to being walk streets if we can. I really think we need to keep all of our options on the table, and yeah, it's common sense.
Thank you, Natalya.
I absolutely do support adding diverters in Santa Monica to make certain streets more walkable and bikeable. I do support adding a diverter on Michigan. I had to go down that street the other day and I noticed how absurdly wide it is and how it incentivizes people who are in cars to speed. It's again, we were talking about speed a little bit earlier, and that is such a big impact on safety. So yes, on Michigan. In terms of where else they might make sense, that's a really good question, and something that if I were on council, would ask staff to look at, because they're the experts and they know where all of the incidents occur. They know what streets are wider and might benefit from it. And I would also ask the public, where do folks want to see them in their neighborhoods, and act on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry.
Thank you. I also support adding diverters on Santa Monica streets. I think what we've done, and I think we should have done them on 17th Street also. 17th Street is a heavily trafficked street. Students going to Santa Monica College, workers coming off from the train. So ideally, we should have done there in Michigan. It makes sense. I agree with Natalya. I would like to see from staff ideas about where it would be much more economical and more feasible to do it. So I don't have any particular streets in mind, but I do believe that anything, as I said before, anything that reduces the amount of traffic, slows down cars, is a benefit for our community. So I do strongly support adding dividers.
Thank you. Dan.
+1 to everything my colleagues have said. Absolutely, I think Michigan needs diverters. There are several other streets that come to mind. Washington is one, with the amount of churches and schools and parks that are along Washington. I know we have similar problems along Idaho, California, and Arizona in my neighborhood in Mid-City, and my neighboring neighborhood in Wilmot. I think there's also an opportunity here that with diverters, we should be working with some of these mapping companies to determine if there are ways that we can partner with them to route traffic guidance onto our main boulevards where traffic is more appropriate and outside of our neighborhood streets. So in short, yes, I absolutely support diverters, and hope that we can see them implemented in other neighborhood streets to calm traffic and route traffic to places where it's more appropriate, specifically commuter traffic.
Thank you. Ericka.
Yes, I absolutely support the traffic diverters as well on Michigan. As a parent of a high school student and seeing all the traffic and how parents are trying to drop their kids off, and us having the traffic along the vehicle traffic, the bike traffic, and pedestrian traffic all together, it is a collision waiting to be happening. I'd also like to see those traffic diverters on Pearl, where we have our junior high, our elementary, and our college all at the same time. The street is wide enough, and divert some of those because people are running through the stop signs. We have been advocating for a long time for them to come and surveil those people that are running through the stop signs and putting our children's lives at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Ellery.
Thank you. So in the summer of 2021, the city pedestrianized Main Street on the weekends, resulting in a 550% increase in pedestrians compared to that of regular weekends. Around the world, pedestrianized streets have been shown to be a boon for local businesses. Would you support the permanent pedestrianization of Main Street? We'll start with you, Natalya.
I totally would. I believe that we should have more pedestrianized streets in Santa Monica. 3rd Street Promenade is fabulous, and I think that it sets a really great standard for places that can be walkable and accessible and inviting to folks. I know we've had some issues with the 3rd Street Promenade more recently, but that's nothing that we can't handle, nothing we can't deal with. I think that what we would need to do if we do decide to permanently pedestrianize Main Street is work with the businesses, work with the residents, and show folks that when we do this, they actually end up getting better business. I mean, much more numbers of pedestrians can visit a business if they're not worried about all of these cars in the way. And as you mentioned, Ellery, there was what, 500% increase in number of people? That's quite a few more customers.
Thank you. Barry?
I think it's a great idea to think about having pedestrian Main Street. You see how successful our promenade has been. I mean, Santa Monica's 8 square miles. The more walking we do, the less car traffic that we have in our city is a positive for our community. So Main Street would be ideal. I know it would support the commercial businesses down there because there would be more people down there. We could have more activities for the community when, and it brings out more families. It brings out more families to the community. I mean, young people and older people can actually come out because it's safer. There's not cars around. So I'm a big proponent of making streets permanent pedestrian streets, and Main Streets is a good idea. So I'd love to hear more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Ellery. I love the concept of open Main Street. When it was brought forward to council, I wrote in to support it. And pointedly, our mayor did not support it, as well as some of his colleagues. I'm committed to continuing this partnership and increased pedestrianization of Main Street, particularly in partnership with our Main Street bid and the Ocean Park Neighborhood Association. I think it promotes economic activity. I think it promotes health and well-being. I'll say right now, after speaking with the executive director the chair of the Main Street bid, the businesses on Main Street are not ready for this, for a permanent pedestrianization. So right now, I think it's important that we continue pushing and change managing some attitudes around this towards increased pedestrianization. I'd like to see expansion of pedestrianization of Main Street, but I'm not ready to commit to a permanent everyday 24/7 pedestrianization.
Thank you, Dan. Ericka?
Yes. And I'm open to the conversation. However, what my thoughts are is that of our labor force, because our labor force that keeps our city running, all of them do not live here within our city walls. And when you see about 3 or 4 o'clock, and I know this is something to reduce traffic, but our labor force is leaving the city. So I think this would enhance traffic, but I'm open to the conversation. I'm definitely willing to look at ways that we can do this and reduce traffic, but also keeping our labor force in mind when we make these considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ericka. And finally, Ellis?
Well, I am fully in support of the permanent pedestrianization of Main Street, and responding to Ericka's point, I don't think we should be afraid of traffic solutions that ultimately slow things down, because that's what makes our streets safer, something that other folks have pointed out earlier. I think that there are some incremental steps we can take on Main Street right now to make it a more walkable, livable street. For example, converting parking spaces into permanent outdoor dining or other types of permanent outdoor use. We also need to think about how the pedestrian experience on Main Street can be enhanced by making the surrounding streets safer. For example, Nielsen right now is an absolute mess. I know certain folks in our our government right now have been not so supportive of adding speed bumps there. We need to fix that. It's an absolute disaster and needs to be much safer for pedestrians. But yeah, absolutely, I would love to see permanent pedestrianization of Main Street.
Thank you. Back to Michael for our next question.
So the city council may soon approve a ballot measure to increase the parking facilities tax in Santa Monica, which would only apply to private parking lots, from 10% to 19%. For every 1% that it's increased, it's estimated to bring in about $1 million a year, so approximately $9–10 million a year that it would raise, which could be used to improve street safety in Santa Monica. Do you support a ballot measure to raise the parking facilities tax? And if so, would you support using the funds that it raises to fund things like pedestrian and bike safety improvements? And on this one, we'll start with Barry.
I would support a ballot measure to raise the parking facility tax. Obviously, it would really make people think about using other alternative methods of driving. I think that the money could be utilized to enhance our city coffers so that we could develop more safe streets. I also believe that in the long run, it will change the culture of our community where people will start thinking about using other alternatives to get through our city. So I'm a strong believer of it and would be a strong supporter of any kind of ballot measure.
Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, this is an important distinction between, I think, this group of candidates and the incumbents. The incumbents over the holidays chose to decrease parking pricing in our public structures. And that did not show an increase in foot traffic or visitation of our promenade in Santa Monica Place and our downtown businesses. I think this group of candidates, and myself included, would be interested in exploring increasing pricing of our parking, either through facilities tax, such as is being proposed here, or through opportunities like dynamic pricing and better street meters and technology to allow for dynamic pricing. We should be doing everything we can to reduce parking, particularly in our downtown areas where it can be quite unsafe to be a pedestrian.
Thank you. Ericka?
Yes, I would support a ballot measure like this to raise the parking facilities tax. I would use those funds or vote to use those funds to improve our pathways, improve our bike path, and to install, my goodness, to reinforce our bike paths to make sure that we have more safer ways for people to travel so that we don't have as many accidents. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis?
Yeah, absolutely. I support this. I think it was Dan who gave a shout out earlier to Donald Shoup. I mean, we need to do everything we possibly can to capture the externalized cost of parking. This is really a policy priority that needs to be at the top of minds of all elected officials. We've got an overabundance of parking downtown, despite what other folks say. I look forward to one day converting that parking into other higher and better uses. But in the meantime, we need to capture the hidden cost of parking, to steal a Shoupism, if you will. Yeah, there's a lot of good things that money can be put towards. For example, as other folks have mentioned, making some of the stroads in our city safer, like Lincoln Boulevard, making or implementing some common sense bicycle and pedestrian safety measures. Yeah, again, absolutely 100% in support of this.
Thank you. And Natalya?
I'll wait till you get the minute back. There you go. So I do absolutely support the concept of a ballot measure to raise the parking facilities tax. My concern with this kind of thing is if we're only targeting private parking facilities, we're missing out on quite a bit of potential revenue. We already heavily subsidize the public parking structures in downtown Santa Monica. And we've done parking efficiency studies, and we found that we are way overparked downtown. So I do want to better understand how the funds are going to come in, how much is going to come in. And in terms of what we use them for, I think pedestrian and bike safety infrastructure is a great place to use it on, but we should also look at spending it on transit and more mobility that can help folks so they don't have to drive.
Thank you. Ellery, over to you.
What are some of the big ideas you have for the future of Santa Monica's transportation system and built environment? Dan, we'll start with you.
Ooh, big ideas. I think it's really important that we, you asked for big ideas, and I would say the big ideas are already out there. It's our bike action plan, it's our pedestrian action plan. I'm super interested in seeing the speed camera experiment on PCH. I would love to get involved in that and the bill be amended, or a new bill to allow Santa Monica to participate in that experiment. I think that that would be a great opportunity to provide some sort of enterprise fund to take the fines from speed cameras and invest those directly into street infrastructure, protect our bicyclists and pedestrians. I think it's also important that we bring housing into the conversation, because transit-oriented development is the way we are going to remain an affordable and inclusive community. It's something I'm talking a lot about on the campaign trail, and hopefully we can talk more about it tonight.
Thank you, Ericka.
Thank you. My vision and some of the plans are basically to have adaptive traffic signals, to also have smart parking or our parking meters, so when a car moves, that it resets, so next car has to pay. We already have some implementation of smart parking in our Santa Monica place, and smart parking telling us to reduce emissions, so people aren't running around looking for a parking spot. I'm also interested in enhancing the EV charging structure here in the Pico neighborhood, so that we can have more clean energy when we do have our cars here in the neighborhood. We have a lot of Teslas here in Santa Monica, or EV cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellis.
Yeah, depending on what statistics you look at, the daytime population of Santa Monica either doubles or triples, because there are so many people who work here but can't afford to live here, or simply just don't have an opportunity to live here. So when we're talking about big ideas for the built environment and transportation, obviously that has to include housing. That's been talked about by a few of my colleagues here tonight before. And so, yeah, when you talk about big ideas, let's think about how we can maximize development on our transit-rich corridors in a way that will give the folks who are driving 3 or 4 hours a day an opportunity to meaningfully live here. A few other big ideas. I'm really looking forward to how we can potentially reuse our airport space in a way to create a really fantastic pedestrian and bicyclist experience there. I think we need to think broadly about the future of our freeway. There have been some talks about capping the freeway. There have been some talk about removing it completely. When we talk about big ideas, I think that has to be part of the conversation, and equity needs to be a part of it, because that land was stolen from people who lived here long ago.
Thank you, Natalya.
So there's a lot of big ideas we could go with, and I think we start with the small ideas, the things that can make the biggest impact for the smallest amount of political capital that we need to expend to get it. So those things that make pedestrians safer and bicyclists safer and everyone safer that we've already talked a lot about would be a really great place to start. I also think that we need to approach how we plan Santa Monica's future from a more holistic manner. So we need to look at, as some folks have mentioned, the relationship between housing and transportation. We know that if we have housing closer to jobs, fewer people need to drive. We also, I'm very strongly committed, I'll say, to working with our regional partners to make sure that our bikeway infrastructure doesn't end at the city limits. You should be able to go from Santa Monica to LA without being stuck on the street in the middle of traffic.
Thank you, Natalya. And Barry.
I have a lot of big ideas, but when I think about, I realize our financial situation is something that's always has a direct effect on how we build our environment. But I do believe that our 3 public administrations, our school district, our college, and our city should work together to build a transportation system that's effective for our 8 square miles. I also think that we should look at ideas as to how we can move our senior population, our residents, around town so they don't have to utilize cars. And we've done it with the hotels. The hotels have a system where they can pick you up and drop you off somewhere very easily. If it's cost effective, I really think we should look at those kind of initiatives that the community of Santa Monica really has the ability to get where they need to get in our city without utilizing their cars. So those are just some of my ideas.
Thank you all. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Hillary. So two more questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. The Metro D line is currently being extended west to the VA, and neighboring jurisdictions have planned bus-only lanes on Wilshire and Santa Monica. City of LA for Wilshire already exists, and Caltrans for Santa Monica Boulevard. The question is, would you support adding bus-only lanes on Santa Monica's portion of Wilshire and Santa Monica Boulevard? And secondly, do you think the D line will ever get to the ocean and or connect with the E line in downtown Santa Monica? We'll start with Ericka.
And I absolutely support this. We have our bus-only lanes on Santa Monica Boulevard already, coming from downtown Santa Monica into the city of Los Angeles. The expansion would definitely be of great interest for the people that are riding the bus. Also, I don't know about whether or not our D line will ever extend to the ocean. They're, discussing now about the funding for that, but I hope that it will. And I would advocate for it to be extended out so that we can have more bus riders and more train riders so people can get out of their cars. And we have to also make sure that these buses and trains are safe while we're making these plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis.
Yeah, well, we need to do everything in our power, if we get elected to city council, to make sure that the D line gets built out all the way to the ocean. What a fantastic opportunity for our city, and what a once in a lifetime opportunity it will be to really build such an impactful transit connection for our city. I absolutely support connecting it to the E line. I'm not really quite sure what that would look like in terms of a design solution, but I would love to see perhaps the D line extended south towards Venice, if we could ever do that. I am absolutely in support of adding bus-only lanes to Wilshire and Santa Monica Boulevard. That's going to be a key part of our transportation infrastructure build-out. In terms of making sure it's effective, we've got to make sure that ridership gets up. We got to make sure that we are expanding our fleet of buses, and we got to make sure that we're expanding opportunities, as Barry said, for seniors and for students to use the network. So yeah, absolutely yes to everything.
Thank you. Natalya.
So yes, I do support adding bus-only lanes to Santa Monica's portion of Wilshire and Santa Monica Boulevard. But as Ellis noted, in order for us to be able to successfully do that, we need to increase ridership. So I think we need to continue down the path that Big Blue Bus is working on right now with Brighter Blue, of improving headways, of better aligning routes to where people need to go. I believe that one of the routes is going to be better aligned to connect with the purple train. And in terms of connecting the D line with the E line, I'm sorry, I keep calling, I always want to call it Expo line because that's close to my heart. I really, really want us to get the purple line all the way to the ocean. It took Expo 30 years to get it to all the way to Santa Monica, but that doesn't mean it wasn't worth doing, and we should work on it for the D line as well.
Thank you. And I also call it the Expo line still. Barry.
Sure. My colleagues have said many of the things that I do agree with. I do support bus lanes in Santa Monica and on Wilshire Boulevard if ridership is warranted. As far as the D line connecting to the E line, anything that allows us to easily get around our region is important to me. I would like to be able to get to the airport in an easy manner. Coming out of Santa Monica during the day is always very difficult, or coming in for individuals is always difficult. So any connection between our city to other regions in our community are important. And so I don't know enough about the connection between the D line or E line to really give you more information about it, but I do believe that any kind of idea of eliminating traffic through cars is something that I support. So thank you.
Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So I use buses on Santa Monica Boulevard all the time. When I go out to West Hollywood or to Venice Main Street, I'll take the Big Blue Bus 1 or I'll take the Metro 4. And this to me is a big issue of equity. You know, I have a choice when I go to West Hollywood. Do I take a $40 Uber that's going to take me 20 minutes? Or do I take the $1.25 for that's going to take me 45? We're not going to be able to increase ridership and thus increase our desire to use buses unless we add bus lanes that make buses more convenient, faster, and increase our frequency of stops. I'm fully supportive of extending the D line out past Westwood down Wilshire. That was once one of our great streetcar lines, and I think that it's a matter of economic development. The 1200 block of the promenade is one of the hardest places to rent, and it's because we don't have enough foot traffic there. The D line would solve that.
Thank you. Over to Ellery for our last question before we go to the audience.
In recent years, the Santa Monica Department of Transportation has experienced a higher loss of staff compared to other departments. Currently, the Mobility Division is operating at only 38% of its pre-pandemic staffing levels. Would you support allocating funds to hire more personnel for the Mobility Division? And if so, how would you find the money for the additional positions? Ellis, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to restore staffing to the extent possible. I mean, obviously, it's a difficult financial time for the city, but there are some potential new revenue streams coming online, including the parking tax we referenced earlier, and Natalya's point about making sure it's implemented equitably, capturing externalities from both public and private parking fees is an important point. But with the staffing issue specifically, counterintuitively in city government, you can often do things cheaper if you hire more people in-house to do it. The cost of outsourcing is a huge cost for our city, and we found that by outsourcing labor costs, it's actually cost us quite a bit. So by restoring positions that were cut in the pre-COVID time, we can save our city money and ultimately get more bang for our buck by bringing back those positions.
Thank you. Natalya.
I do support allocating funds to hire more personnel for the Mobility Division. I understood but was very disappointed by the amount of staffing and the amount of resources that we needed to cut during COVID. But it is where it is and what it is, and we are where we are. I think that we need to prioritize which positions have the biggest impact and which positions are most important to bring back sooner. For example, I think it is imperative that we hire a safe routes to school coordinator because we haven't had one of those in a while, and kids and their parents and guardians need to be able to get to and from school more safely without having to rely on a car. In terms of finding money for the additional positions, we need to take a closer look at the budget and make some difficult decisions about trade-off. Can't tell you from where, but we need to look at the budget.
Thank you. Barry.
I think that increasing our mobility division is important. And I was really disappointed when we had to go through these incredible financial cuts back into, I think it was 2020, 2019, 20. I would look at the budget. I would make this a priority, as I said earlier, in our whole financial plan. I would look at parking fees. I would look at the penalties for drivers that are for parking and for driving transit, and allocate those kind of funds directly to our mobility division if that was the case. But I'd have to take a look at the budget and really see where we could find ways of increasing it, these positions. And I agree with what Natalya said, the safe routes to school coordinator would be an ideal position because we need to have safer ideas for our students.
Thank you. Dan.
Thanks. This is such a tough question because I think all of us want to increase the personnel and hire more personnel for the mobility division. But right now in our city, of course, the question is where do the funds come from? We're facing the country's largest ever sexual assault lawsuit. We cut massive amounts of staff in COVID. And this is absolutely a priority for me. But I'm also interested in restoring things like our housing trust fund. And I think that that is critically important in a greater way than funding additional positions for the mobility division at the moment. As our general fund increases and as we explore opportunities either through parking taxes or speed camera fines or dynamic pricing for parking, then absolutely this should be a priority. And I do think that there's just so much funding out there from grants and the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we can work with the staff that we have to continue to drive these capital improvement projects until our general fund is restored.
Thank you. And finally, Ericka.
Thank you. I agree with Dan. I actually was about to say federal funding dollars are available for us to fund or restaff our mobility division. However, I am also, as I'm in housing on the rent control board, the housing stock and our housing money has to be restored. That is a priority. We can't get mobility until we get our affordable housing back up and running, so they can restaff our mobility division and possibly get some of those people here in the city of Santa Monica, so we could reduce this footprint of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to Michael for our Q&A.
Thanks. And I realized we did not prepare a dedicated slide for Q&A, so we're just going to keep this picture up and use it for the timer. Natalya, you'll start, followed by Barry, Dan, Ericka, and then we'll continue the rotation. The first question is, should we close the pier to cars and allow more pedestrians and bicyclists to use the pier bridge instead? And we'll start with you, Natalya.
I think we should limit the pier to cars. I really loved when we didn't have parking on the pier during COVID and it was all pedestrian use. I do completely understand there is a challenge of folks who have disabilities or other challenges that make it necessary for them to have to be able to drive onto the pier. But at the same time, I know that right now we are in the process of upgrading that pier bridge, of making it more accessible to folks. And once we do that, I think we'll be able to move towards not having parking spots on the pier and being able to use that space for something that truly serves our community. I should also note that unfortunately, since it is on the coast, it would have to go through the Coastal Commission, and that's not necessarily an easy process. But like other things, just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Barry?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because it's on the coast, it would have to go through the Coastal Commission to make that determination. My preference would be to eliminate cars on the pier and establish something where people that have disabilities people that aren't capable of walking down to the pier, to have some way of getting them down and back up off the pier. That pier would be fantastic for bikers, people walking, those type of activities. I think cars just are not equipped to be down there for when it really gets crowded, and I've seen it, and it gets really hectic. So I would definitely look for ways to eliminate it if we could.
Thank you. Dan?
I love this question. Thank you for whoever asked it. So I'm on the pier board, so I'm pretty intimately familiar with the details of the pier bridge replacement project. I think it's everyone's preference that the pier is pedestrianized, with the exception of certain things like emergency vehicle access, of course. But the reality is Caltrans is funding the pier bridge replacement project, and that bridge needs to be replaced for safety reasons. It is unstable. It does not meet earthquake standards. And we have a very short time to do it before the 2028 Olympics. So at the time, as hard as this answer is, the vehicle or the pier will remain open to vehicles. Once we're through that project, I think everyone in the community is open to decreasing access on the pier for vehicles and increasing foot traffic and pedestrian and bicycle improvements, some of which I've had the opportunity to influence as a pier board member.
Thank you. Ericka?
Yes, it is of our heart's desire for the residents and the visitors for the pier bridge to be shut down. However, we need to make sure that it's ADA compliant for people that have disabilities to be able to maybe perhaps get into an elevator and take that elevator up to get on the pier and where they can actually enjoy some of those things. We could have more community groups up there and more community activities so that we can celebrate one another and get to know our community members a little bit better.
Thank you. Ellis.
Yeah, I find myself largely in agreement with my colleagues. I absolutely agree that the pier should be prioritized for pedestrian use, and to the extent that we can limit cars going on there, I fully support that, though, as others have mentioned, there are obviously some complicating factors here. You know, the folks who get elected to council this time around will be working on some really, really important long-term planning initiatives during their time in office, one of which is the 7th cycle housing element, but specific to the pier question, they'll be working on finalizing and finally getting an adopted local coastal program. The local coastal program we have right now incorporates parking standards and parking ideologies, for lack of a better term, from the early 1990s that are sorely outdated and don't really reflect the reality of creating a pedestrian-focused, walkable, livable city. So something to keep in mind when you're voting for your council candidates this year.
Thank you. Next question. Do you support the mayor being elected instead of appointed? And maybe I'll tack on something else. Would you be in support of districting in Santa Monica? We'll start with Barry.
Right now, I would not support the mayor being elected. I like the fact that it's appointed position. We're a charter city that's run by a city manager. So that's my thoughts on that. And I've been very vocal on the at-large versus district voting. I don't support district voting at all. The at-large voting would allow me as an African American to be able to talk to all 90,000 citizens and be a council person for all 90,000 citizens. The district voting initiative was set up to bring in more minorities or have the ability for more minorities to be elected. We don't have that issue in Santa Monica on all 3 of our administrative boards, the city council, school board, and the college. So we show representation from all groups, so I'm not supportive of district voting.
Thank you. Dan.
I am not in support of districting in Santa Monica precisely because of how our minority populations are spread throughout the city. For example, if we followed the map that the plaintiffs have proposed in the CVRA lawsuit, 65% of Latino voters would be cracked into majority white districts. That makes no sense to me. If we were to have to be forced to move into districting by a court ruling or elsewise, I would want to maintain some form of at-large representation in like a hybrid system. I currently don't support an at-large elected mayor. I think the council manager form of government is great for a city of our size. You know, I have a master of public administration. I've spent a lot of time studying this. Council manager forms of government in general are seen as more efficient, more equitable, and more ethical. So at this time, no, I think we should maintain our council manager form of government.
Ericka.
Well, as plenty, maybe not, people know that I've spoken out publicly on several different occasions and several different platforms against district voting. Our city is only 8.35 square miles, and we don't have enough space to go to districting. It's been alleged that these things would disenfranchise our minority population here in Santa Monica to go to district voting, as we have a well-represented council, a well-represented school board. I don't believe that these things would make anything better for our communities here at large. We need to stay at large for our mayor and for our voting rights right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis.
Yeah, I'm somewhat ambivalent about the directly elected mayor question, as long as it can be maintained within a council manager system of government. I think that there are potential pros and cons to it, and it's, I think, worthy of further discussion. As for the question of districting, no, I'm not in favor of that. My personal preference is for citywide ranked choice voting. But as others have pointed out through many public forums, whatever system of government we have has to be supported and voted on by the people. And to the extent that other folks have other good ideas for how to fashion our electoral system, I'll support what the voters support. That all being said, there are some other, I think, governance reforms that I'd be interested in exploring. The city council essentially does a full workday or more, 9 or 10 hours of work starting at 5 p.m. That implicates some accessibility issues, and I look forward to discussing how we can address that in a broader way.
Natalya.
So I really appreciate this question, especially the second part. On the elected versus appointed mayor, I've heard the idea floated. I would need to better understand the pros and cons of doing it within Santa Monica and potential costs and other implications for me to form a well thought out position on it. With regards to districts versus at large, I support at large voting right now. I have been deep in the weeds of the CVRA lawsuit that Santa Monica has been dealing with since, I want to say, 2016, 2017. And I just want to note that the voters of Santa Monica have twice rejected district voting. There have been 2 ballot measures in the past that proposed district voting, and both were turned down. And the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of California declined to move the city to districts while the case has been ongoing.
Thank you. Next question from Anders. How would you address the resistance likely to stem from investment in pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure? What specifically do you intend on doing to garner long-term support and foster education on the benefits of mobility? I will start with Dan on this.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I'm looking for it in the chat.
How would you address the resistance likely to stem from investment in pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure? What specifically do you intend to do to garner long-term support and foster education on the benefits of multimodality?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think relying on data and best practices is what's most important here. There are entire organizations of city planners and bike safety advocates, pedestrian advocates who have dedicated their lives to studying this through peer-reviewed studies. And I think that the more we rely on that kind of data versus the anecdotes that we see being thrown around by the incumbent council members on the dais that drive their decision-making, will be important to garnering community support. But I also think it's important that we don't sit in an ivory tower of data and studies and actually go out and show the community how important some of these infrastructure improvements have been. That's why, again, I would give a shout out to the Mobility for Who Instagram account for doing that every day and showing how these improvements are bettering the lives of our bicyclists and pedestrians.
Thank you. Ericka.
Well, I have to follow up right behind Dan and say, first of all, we bring community to the table. You don't make a decision that affects people that live there or work there or, run their businesses there without bringing them to the table and bringing their voices in so that they can have some buy-in. Education is elevation. They need to be educated, and we need to know feedback as how this affects them and what other ways that we can work together collaboratively to make sure that this works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis?
Yeah, I again largely agree with my colleagues here. I think our elected officials need to lead by example. Our elected officials need to be seen walking our streets, riding our buses. I ride what I still call the Expo line to downtown LA for work. I ride the 7 line on Pico to planning commission meetings, and I walk our city. And folks need to be a visible advocate for actually using the infrastructure that we're investing in. But to Anders' real question here, I think that to some extent, if you build livable, walkable communities and you invest in building housing on transit-rich boulevards, if you build it, people will come. People will use it if you actually build out the infrastructure.
Thank you. Natalya.
I agree with a lot of what's already been said. And in addition, I think that we need to show folks what's in it for them. What's in it for our community, for our neighbors, when we have stronger pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure. And what do they get from it? They get cleaner air. They get fewer people hurt in traffic violence. They get beautiful streets where they can walk down the sidewalk and not have to trip on a broken sidewalk. There's so much that building better pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure does for our community. I think we also need to invest in the types of programs that help support folks transition away from cars and towards more sustainable transportation methods, like our wonderful e-bike voucher program that we have. We should expand that.
Thank you. Barry.
You have to live by example. You have to look at statistics, best practices in other communities, other states, other countries where they've been successful. Right? There's a statistic that you brought out earlier that the amount of deaths by children are higher than in our city than anywhere else. These are the kind of statistics make you realize that you have to change, and there's going to be, you always have pressure from those that resist change. It's difficult. I've mentioned to many people, how difficult it is to take the keys from your parents when they're no longer able to drive any longer. That's a difficult conversation for people in households. And we have to have that as city leaders to be able to say, it's time to reduce the amount of car trips. It's time to be more secure and safe for our children. So that's what I would be talking about.
Thank you. Next question, and Ericka, we'll start with you on this one. This is from Dustin. Any thoughts on reallocating existing on-street parking towards delivery zones? Even in areas with reasonably good bike infrastructure, there are constantly USPS trucks, Amazon vans, and Uber drivers blocking traffic and forcing bikes into car lanes. And this isn't in the question, but I'll just add, they also often park in the red part of the curb, which then blocks sight lines from drivers and reduces visibility at intersections. So thoughts on reallocating existing on-street parking towards loading zones? Starting with you, Ericka.
Thank you for that question. As a former Uber and Lyft driver, that's something that's desperately needed, as they are looking for places to pull over that is safe, so they can safely drop passengers off in the car, off from the car, to leave safely and not disturb the flow of traffic. We desperately need that so that it can be safer. I understand exactly what you're talking about with the red zones. That's to be avoided at all costs. However, when there's nowhere else and the passenger tells the driver to pull over, they usually pull over where the passenger asks them to pull over at. So we try to avoid that, but it would make more sense if we had a delivery zone for all these different transports that come to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis.
Yeah, the hair on the back of my neck always bristles a little bit when you replace one car serving use with another car serving use, that gives me some pause. But I think that this is a question worthy of serious consideration, and I would support, to the extent possible, making our streets safer by diverting parking spaces for uses that make more sense, for example, a loading zone if we can. In the Pico neighborhood where I live, near the intersection of Kansas and with 28th Street, and Natalya lives right around the corner from this too. Yeah, there's a red zone where, there's critically needed daylighting that's taken up every single day by Amazon trucks, UPS, mail trucks. And there's got to be a better way. I think, in the long term, there will be technological solutions to this, including automated solutions to all of this. But in the meantime, yeah, we should look into common sense solutions like reprioritizing street space to the extent we can.
Thank you. Natalya.
I think it'd be a great idea to have more loading zones rather than on-street parking in certain areas of our city. I think that however we choose to do it, it needs to be done in a very thoughtful way so that we're putting the loading zones where people truly need them, including on some neighborhood streets folks might not think of. I think that we also need to do more to expand methods of delivery and transporting folks that don't harm our environment like cars do. We currently have a zero emission pilot program, but the area is very limited and it's voluntary. I think that we can look at how to expand that, how to make it better. And there's a lot more we can do as well. Maybe allowing folks to do more bike deliveries and things of that nature.
Barry.
So I strongly think that we should look at ways of setting up zones so that Uber drivers and trucks that have to for delivery have access and easy access. At the college, when we were looking at developing our student affairs services building, where drop off and pickup for students was a key discussion when we developed it. And I think any new development, any new commercial or residential development should really put this as a priority as to where we're going to have areas centrally located for delivery trucks, for other types of pickups like Uber and Lyft, because that's the way of the future. And we need to think about that as we think about eliminating cars.
Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So I talked about this in my Santa Monica Democratic Club questionnaire. I think these types of zones make a lot of sense. I would feel wrong if I didn't disclose that I work for a company that would benefit from these zones. So I would have to recuse from any public discussion on this topic. And also because of that, due to my I guess sense of ethics here, I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to make this a central aspect of my campaign. But I do think that these types of zones make a lot of sense, particularly when they're optimized for zero emission delivery vehicles.
All right. We've got 10 minutes left and we need 5 minutes for your closing statements. So we could try to do 2 questions. We can do 30 seconds. Otherwise, this will be our last audience question. As you guys, I'm just going to give a little context. As you probably know, Metro has been studying congestion pricing in Los Angeles, and New York City is going to become the first city in the country to turn on congestion pricing. I think we're literally weeks away. So the question is, what would your opinion be on potential congestion zone pricing, similar to something like in New York City? And I'll add a little bit more context. I know Metro was studying the 10 freeway as a potential cordon for congestion pricing. So congestion pricing in Los Angeles and in and around Santa Monica. We'll start with Ellis.
Yeah, broadly speaking, I think that congestion pricing can be a really effective way to, again, capture some of the externalized cost of using our streets in a way that will benefit the public and will benefit the social good. There are some really, really complex equity issues that come into play with this that I know New York policymakers have talked about at quite some length, and I think that there are some important lessons we can learn from them. In California, we've for a long time had an option to essentially pay to go in the fast lane. There are really deep-rooted inclusivity and equity issues with that, and I hope that we really make equity a priority in how we implement congestion pricing in Santa Monica. But as a fundamental policy issue, yeah, absolutely, I support it, and I think it's a great way to address some of our more pressing transportation issues locally.
Thank you. Natalya.
I think congestion pricing is a fascinating idea. I think that however it could potentially be implemented, it needs to be data driven. We need to make sure that it is impacting the correct areas and the correct modes of transit. And as Alice noted, it would need to be done in a very equitable manner because, as we know, a lot of the folks who have to drive into Santa Monica from, an hour, 2 hours away are doing it because they work here and they can't afford to live here. So there's a lot of variables that we need to consider in this. Outside of that, if we do implement congestion pricing, we need to be very mindful of what those funds are going to. And I think that if we do implement congestion pricing, the funds should go to improving transit and equitable access for streets.
Barry?
I think it's based on best practices, but some of my ideas would be access to our freeways with congestion prices. Like Natalya said, I would probably create lower or zero cost for people making minimum wage with respect to it. Price parking at market rates. Eliminate free parking in the city. Set a goal to eliminate all street parking on major streets. I know this is a big idea, but we have to be able to reduce the amount of deaths in our city. And when there's a high amount of auto trafficking going on, it really is a high risk for fatality. So anything that we can do to reduce congestion in our traffic is something that I'm very supportive of. So those are some of my ideas.
Thank you. Dan?
I think Ellis hit it exactly right. As a policy idea, congestion pricing is super interesting. But for Santa Monica in particular, a lot of our traffic, particularly going into downtown, comes from hourly wage earning workers that support our restaurants, our retail, our hospitality industry, that drive our tourism industry. I see those workers as being needed to be looked at through a different lens than maybe your average tourist that comes to Santa Monica. So due to equity concerns, we would need to do this in a very nuanced way if we were to explore it in Santa Monica.
Thank you. Ericka?
I find this interesting as well. It's kind of correlated to surge pricing as they have on Uber and Lyft as far as, and then to also add the surge pricing, I think would make it rather unaffordable for those low income workers that we have come here if they're using our rideshare services. But I would definitely like to look into it. It's an interesting concept I'm not very familiar with. So I'm just being candid and just, being truthful. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, we are perfectly on time. So we're going to go to our closing statements now. And Natalya, we will start with you whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much to Streets for All for hosting this wonderful debate, this forum. Thank you so much to the audience for tuning in and those of you watching on YouTube. Mobility is such an important topic because it impacts us every single day. How do we get around our city? I have been part of the Santa Monica community for over a decade. And for over a decade, I've been advocating for positive change and I've been serving my community. I served 4 years as president of the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica. I serve on the advisory board of Climate Action Santa Monica and on the advisory board of Virginia Avenue Park and a bunch of other things that it would take too long to list. In 2022, when I ran, I was honored to be endorsed by Streets for All, and I hope that I've earned your support once again this year, and I look forward to supporting this mission as a council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry?
I also want to thank Street for All for this forum. It's been very informative for me. I've always been a big advocate for reducing traffic in our community. On the college board, We've established the anytime fare where our students can ride our blue bus for free, which I think is huge. We were one of the major traffic contributors at the college, and we've reduced that. So I was very supportive of that. As a parent of students children that have gone through our school system, I was incredibly big on an initiative for riding safe to our schools. So I'm looking forward to doing that again. And as an individual who is looking at our senior population, I think that we need to look at ways to make it safer and more accessible for them to get around the city. So I thank you again and hope that we can have this discussion many times again.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Like I said in my intro, I've walked every street in Santa Monica, end to end, from Centinela to PCH, from San Vicente to Dewey. We may be miles ahead of our neighboring Los Angeles, but we're still light years away from the leadership role that we once had on these issues. We have the opportunity this year to elect 4 new data-driven urbanists who understand that public transit and public safety means converting stroads like Wilshire, Santa Monica, and Lincoln into multimodal streets to save lives, who understand that public transit equals equity, that protecting our kids means protecting their routes to schools just as much, if not more, than hardening against active shooters, who understand that housing and transit are inextricably linked to increasing affordability and inclusivity. Santa Monica could be the next Cambridge, we could be the next Paris, we could be the next Hoboken, but it will take completely flipping our city council this election. I'd be honored to earn your support, or have your support, and I hope to earn. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ericka?
Thank you for hosting this forum. As an advocate for pedestrian and bike safety for many years, my family and I ride our bikes through Santa Monica. We walk the entire the 8.3 square miles of this city together, and we know the streets are not safe. I would be very honored to be your council member to advocate for these streets to be much safer. As a leader for much of the community and various community groups and community backed, I would be very graciously to lead you into a greener and safer streets for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellis?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ellery, and thank you to Barry, Dan, Ericka, Natalya. I always come away from these forums learning so much from my colleagues, and I really feel tremendously uplifted by the conversation we've had here today. As others have said before me tonight, this is going to be a tremendously impactful election, and I know we say that every 4 years, but this year especially so. There are really, really key planning initiatives where we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get it right, whether it's transforming the airport, the 7th cycle housing element, our local coastal program, and so many other things. We need elected officials who are knowledgeable and who actually understand the issues and understand what the priorities really should be. Through my work on the Planning Commission, through the Sierra Club as an environmental attorney, I've really been an advocate for making sure that we can build livable, walkable, and safe communities. Again, I hope I can have your support and look forward to continuing the dialogue and continuing to work with all of you as we move forward.
Well, this has been the most on-time group I think we've ever hosted. So I want to thank everybody for that. I want to thank Dan, Natalya, Barry, Ellis, and Ericka. This isn't easy. They make it look easy, but it's not that easy to have concise, well-thought answers in 1 minute on a variety of topics. So we really appreciate your time. We wish you the best of luck in the election. And I want to thank the audience for showing up tonight and asking so many questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. We got to as many as we could. So I'm going to wish everybody good night. This recording will be posted on our YouTube channel and on social media tomorrow. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating. Good night.